John Lothian News wants you to be safe and for us to be able to return to being with one another again. To get there, we need to do the following to beat this pandemic. Wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands for 20 seconds at a time, and self-monitor your temperature. Stay safe, stay smart.
Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the Markets Wiki Education history-focused video series and more.
Great question, how I found my way to this industry, because my political science degree on my LinkedIn page doesn't indicate I have any business being in finance. My brother-in-law was in the wheat pit at the Board of Trade, and in between my last 2 senior years, I went to University of Wisconsin for 4.5 years. That last summer, I came down and I was an intern for one of the more prolific wheat traders, and I clerked from that summer and fell in love with the place and came back the next summer. Probably the most legendary and was the game of horse at the Union League Club. One prolific trader in the soybean pit was challenged by one of the clerks and later found out this guy was a ringer and had gone exchange to exchange. And just being in a gym full of people where everybody went to see these two guys duke it out on a horse game was just incredible. But those were always the stories of like the unreal, like that didn't happen. And then you tell the story and everybody goes, oh no, it happened. I was there. I didn't really have a style. I was always trying to figure out a style, and it seemed like things were changing so rapidly and I wasn't making money enough to like form a style. It took me a couple years to figure it out. So I went from figuring out how to do this, to the machines came in and you'd start seeing like 6 bid at 2. It'd be 6 bid on the screen with the electronic trading, and in the pit they'd be offering them at 2, and you had your headset on and 6 bid at 2, you'd hit the 6s by the 2s. That was great. I would love to do that for the rest of my life, John. Like that was the most incredible time, right? But then all of a sudden it was even bid at 1, 1,000 up on the screen, and the pit was gone. So it was like, oh, where did that 6 bid at 2 thing go? So I wouldn't say I ever really got a style of trading. I did evolve when I left the floor. I'm like, all right, I'll try trading on the screen. And the first time I had like a 5 lot on, I was shaking. I'm like, well, this isn't working. So I started developing a longer term appreciation for the true natural laws of investing and trading. And that's where I really, I think, hit my style, or it was more taking the lessons I learned of the natural laws of the relationships of risk reward and humans and money, emotions and money. In commodities, I never really had a bias. You were just always kind of looking at the signals, like how fast is that trader chewing his gum? How fast is that person rubbing his head? And he seems to be rubbing it harder when the market goes up. He must be short. He must be short a lot. Like you would kind of pick more up on the nuances of reading the pit. And I was lucky enough to work for a guy who was one of the best pit readers out there, and lucky enough that he would, while I was counting his cards, he'd lean over and tell me, hey, this guy's this guy's that. And he was teaching me and I was learning it. The problem was that was changing faster than I could stay and make money doing it. I think errors happen to test your fortitude. I've had bad errors, but bad errors happen to everybody, and you figure out how to work your way out of it. Like, I've never had an error that's taken me out of the game, and I'm grateful for that. But I've had some errors, and just because I learned back in the day, errors happen. If you're good and you're a good person and you do the right thing, you'll find some other good people that'll do the right thing and help you out of those errors. It's the people that leave the business after there's errors. I always have felt that from what I learned, there must have been something not good about it, or somebody involved in it didn't do the right thing, because I've had errors that I'd be out of this business if I didn't have good people around me doing the right thing. Chaos, it was trying to figure out what everything was going on, and the bell would ring and it was just complete chaos trying to figure out your position count and, how high the market was going to go if you're short and get run over. It was like the fluttering of your heart. I always compared it to like running out of the tunnel in a packed gymnasium for a basketball game, and your heart just flutters. That's what it felt like every morning at the Board of Trade on the open. It was like, here we go. And your heart flutters, and then boom, the bell rang and it was in your face. The last strike for me was the getting stuck on a close, actually. I had two hands up in the air, but I wasn't really, I was trying to find a trade, and the guy standing next to me he's like, I'll buy 56. And I wrote it down and it just went straight up. And, it wasn't a huge one, but I probably lost $15,000 to $20,000 right on the close there. And I had just worked up enough in my account, and it wiped out my account again. So I was like, it was probably like 3 or 4 months after that, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't make it work. The only reason you would be in the pit if it was slow is you were trying to make some money or you weren't where you wanted to be. The guys that were making money or comfortable, they would come in on the open, leave, go play basketball. Some guys would go to a bar. Some people, whatever your liking was, if you were good on the open and you were making money, you had a little free time during the day. So I usually would either go eat lunch, or when I was trading, I used to play basketball. There was a gym not too far away that had a basketball court. So I'd leave, 10 o'clock, get ready, get dressed. We'd run a game or two over at the gym, shower, come back for the close. The locals were always kind of in it together. One time, one of the locals said, hey, that guy's a good guy. You don't have to get upset with him. He's one of us. He's one of the good ones. So you would kind of just band together. It was never a strategy. You were always together. Like the locals tried to help each other out. I always compared it to the cartoon with the coyote and that sheepdog. They would say hi to each other, like, hey, Sam, hey, George. And they'd check in and beat each other up all day. And then they would check out. And then at the end of the day, they'd put their arm around each other and walk home with their lunch boxes. That's kind of what the pit was like. We were friends going in. We wrestled a bit for a couple hours, and then we were friends going out. If you saw something that looked below the deck, it got called out immediately. I never saw anything that looked or smelt like fraudulent activity. I know it does go on, but people make mistakes, and, somebody might try to bag a trade here or there. But if you did something that even smelled funny, there were 6 guys screaming and yelling, like, knock it off. And the funny thing is that accountability, if you did it again, that's when people started getting, hey, you did it twice now, pal. You're in the wheat pit, not the corn pit. No, I'm just kidding. Nothing against the corn pit. It was endless, especially around this time of year, the holiday season, it was endless. And the same thing, you would see guys, hey, my daughter's Girl Scout. You're all buying cookies. And he's like, my daughter's a good girl, and their troop is going to be like, they would support their causes as much as anything. And it was endless. And the great thing about the endless support is the biggest hearts on these guys, they knew if it was real or not. And if it was real, everybody would support it. But you always knew if somebody wasn't really supportive of their charity, then they wouldn't get help. It would just go away. But the goodness in all the pits, it was great. And I think it's because that goodness existed, and the guys that were good, they had really good BS sensors, because they had to, when they were trading, they had to be able to sniff it out fast. So it was, John, I can't even answer the question. There was so much. You saw the goodness every day in every way. People act a little different when money enters the room. Your emotions bring out, again, good and bad, and those reactions, and you can read that. That's probably the biggest lesson that I learned that's helped me the most, is understanding that true relationship people have with money and how they view money. And they show you every day. Like if you walk in a room and somebody puts a $5 bill on the table and somebody runs after it, my reaction is going to be, do you need some money? Can I help you? Like, run after the $5 bill. If two people walk into a room and there's a $5 bill and there's a discussion, that probably tells me that both people are okay and, you don't need any help right now. So let's have a discussion about splitting this $5. Like, that relationship isn't taught to us at any age. We're raised to not talk about money. We're raised to not go up to people and ask them how much they make. But there is a relationship there that I learned. It took a few years for me to understand that, but that's a real life skill, and it transferred over very, very well into asset management. Feel like part of my job, I got paid to just look for one of those traders. Like I just stood on the edge of the pit, and my boss told me, see that guy? And I said, yep. He's like, stand right there and tap me on the shoulder when he's close to the pit. He's like, do not do anything else. And I'm like, do nothing. He's like, don't do anything else. He's like, I'm paying you to stand in that spot to tell me if this guy ever comes into the pit. And that just meant, he was like a buy broker. And if my guy was short, he wanted to know if that guy started walking. He didn't want to wait until he got to the pit. He wanted to know if he was walking over so he could put two and two together. When I started, it was still hand signals. And then you could see these little things happening. And I would scratch my head when the machines first connected to the exchanges. A handful of guys left the floor. And, years later, they're now selling their technology software companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. But they realized that inflection point immediately and left the floor. And I wasn't able to realize that's why they left the floor. They saw something that understood, they had the money, and they could execute. There's so many things like that. I worked on a trade desk when I was 26 for one of the larger bond brokers, started an electronic desk. So he had an aha moment and got a Project A screen and a Globex terminal, and we started answering orders. Well, that was a change. That didn't exist. I'm like, hey, has anybody, you go to the old guys in the pit and you say, hey, has anybody worked on the bond desk upstairs? Because this, and they're like, bond desk upstairs, bond desk is over there. It was like, you saw so many of these little things changing, and they were all changing in real time. And there's been so many like that. I had one, it wasn't even the full year, just a good run at trading, and then basically started noticing that it was harder and harder to make money the way I had made it in that good period of time. And then I had a loser, and was lucky enough to work with good people that helped me out and kept me in the business long enough to get out of that loser, the old debit. But was lucky enough to work with people in this industry that kept me in it to work off the loser. And then I was burnt. I was worn out, and I was taking on more risk to make less money. And finally, somebody said, hey, why don't you try giving something else a shot? I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. Because all the old guys were coming up to me, and they're like, this isn't what I grew up with. And, I listened. So I left the floor, and it was really that reason. I couldn't make the money that I thought I could make. Like even my brother-in-law, he got there. He was 4 years older than me. His dad was in the wheat pit and, in the ripe old years, and was able to make money. And they were telling me too, they're like, this isn't what we knew the Board of Trade to be. So when the good people in the business were telling me this isn't what they knew, and it just, the light bulb went off that, hey, this place has changed and I need to get out of here. That was in February of 2002, probably 3 years too late. I started working for a startup and learned and saw a first technology shift. I mean, we were helping people convert from calling orders onto the floor to point and clicking them, and they didn't know how to access it. So we were basically just selling access to all the orders went over here. Here's how you open an account online. You click this button, send me this information. Well, it used to be we'd send out paper forms, and then paper forms would come back, but take a week. Somebody said, hey, I can take all that information and jam it into a computer, and we can open an account online, and it'll only take a day instead of 2 weeks. Well, a day to open an account. I mean, one of the custodians now in Chicago has that process down to 3 minutes. Company was My Futures Online. I don't remember the exact amount of time. It was like 2 or 3 years, like 03 to 06. And I left because something changed again. We started slowing down. We were opening a bunch of accounts, and then all of a sudden it just kind of slowed down. And I'm like, why is it slowing down? And we figured, hey, it's slowing down because we did a good job of converting the people that called to point and click, and now there's no new people. They're converted. And I'm like, we need to either educate people on what the value of this market is, or we need to figure out why and what the next move is. And at that same time, there was a company not too far across, like down the hall from us, that was doing something very similar, but they were doing a great job of educating people and opening accounts left and right. And that was Options Express. When Options Express launched and really started doing the educational stuff they did, I understood it. So they let me they sponsored me for my Series 7. They had a professional service division called Brokers Express, but they essentially allowed me to sponsor me for my Series 7 and allowed me to transfer that knowledge I learned from that other startup, My Futures Online. And that's when it really grew. So they let me white label their technology. And that company was called Know Your Options. So Know Your Options became a retail brokerage, asset management, like a registered investment advisor. And I was managing a couple option strategies and really gave me the opportunity to educate people. So I went out and just started touring the country and giving educational seminars to people, teaching them the lessons I learned for myself in the pit, in the wheat pit. Recently started Regiment Alpha, the venture capital fund. And Regiment Alpha is my attempt, my goal, to take all of the last 20 years of experience that I've learned on all sides of the business, the buy side, the sell side, the trading, and the asset management, front, middle, and back office, and apply the experience I've learned to essentially invest in the next wave of investment opportunities. And they say in finance that you never want to lose a good potential crisis. And we have a global, pandemic that has opened up so much opportunity, especially in fintech. And Regiment Alpha is essentially my way of saying I'm going to take all this 20 years of experience of every side of the market, and I'm going to apply it to the next opportunity. So Regiment Alpha's focus is early stage fintech startups. In early stage, we mean seed and Series A. And fintech is a pretty broad word. So we look at it as 4 things. The first is wealth tech. So anything that touches the life of a financial advisor or registered investment advisor, wealth management, front, middle, back office, SaaS is what we're looking at investing in. The second area is reg tech. We've got a pretty wide network in the regulatory technology space, and we see it as a big winner. It's not the fun and attractive area of fintech, but we see the world going global. The global digitalization of assets are going to need to be surveilled, and we're looking in those areas. Another area of fintech is capital markets, specifically anything that looks like a marketplace or exchange. And then the last thing we're looking at within fintech is payments. So anything that can affect the speed, accuracy, or security of payments. And most of that right now is looking and sounding like the words blockchain and digital assets. So those are the 4 areas within fintech and the 2 stages of the company that we look to invest in. And it is worth mentioning that we look to be a lead or co-lead. And I think it's also worth mentioning that really the check is where the investment starts with us. We really want to put our thumb on the scale for the startups. And once we write the check, connect them to all of our industry partners that can help them lower their capital expenditures, as well as connect them to all of the people that I've met and have good relationships with in the financial services industry that can help them pilot and accelerate their growth in the larger institutions.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets Wiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.